"The ship?" Clayton asked conversationally. The man nodded and grinned. "Yeah, 4 hours before we take off again." He poured down the whiskey. "Sure cold out." Clayton agreed. It's always cold. He watched enviously as the spaceman ordered another whiskey. Clayton couldn't afford whiskey. He probably could have by this time, if the mines had made him a foreman like they should have. Maybe he could talk the spaceman out of a couple of drinks. "My name's Clayton. Ron Clayton." The spaceman took the offered hand. "Mine's Parkinson, but everybody calls me Parks." "Sure, Parks. Can I buy you a beer?" Parks shook his head. "No, thanks. I started on whiskey." "Here, let me buy you one." "Well, thanks. Don't mind if I do." They drank them in silence, and Parks ordered 2 more. "Been here long?" Parks asked. 15 years. 15 long, long years." "Did you, I mean..." Parks looked suddenly confused. Clayton glanced quickly to make sure the bartender was out of earshot. Then he grinned. "You mean, am I a convict?" "No, I came here because I wanted to. But," he lowered his voice, "we don't talk about it around here, you know." He gestured with one hand, a gesture that took in everyone else in the room. Parks glanced around quickly, moving only his eyes. "Yeah, I see," he said softly. "This your first trip?" asked Clayton. "First time to Mars. Been on the lunar run a long time." "Low pressure bother you much?" "Not much. We only keep it as 6 pounds in the ships. Half helium, half oxygen. Only thing that bothers me is the oxy here, or rather the oxy that isn't here." He took a deep breath through his nose tube to emphasize his point. Clayton clamped his teeth together, making the muscles at the side of his jaw stand out. Parks didn't notice. "You guys have to take those pills, don't you?" "Yeah." "I had to take them once. Got stranded on Luna. The cat I was in broke down 80-some miles from Aristarchus base, and I had to walk back with my oxy low. Well, I figured..." Clayton listened to Parks' story with a great show of attention, but he had heard it before. This lost on moon stuff and its variations had been going the rounds for 50 years. Every once in a while it actually did happen to someone, just often enough to keep the story going. This guy did have a couple of new twists, but not enough to make the story worthwhile. "Boy," Clayton said when Parks had finished, "you were lucky to come out of that alive." Parks nodded, well pleased with himself, and bought another round of drinks. "Something like that happened to me a couple of years ago," Clayton began. "I'm supervisor on the 3rd shift in the mines at Zante, but at the time I was only a foreman. One day, a couple of guys went to the branch tunnel to..." It was a very good story. Clayton had made it up himself, so he knew that Parks had never heard it before. It was gory in just the right places, with a nice effect at the end. "So I had to hold up the rocks with my back while the rescue crew pulled the others out of the tunnel by crawling between my legs. Finally they got some steel beams down there to take the load off, and I could let go. I was in hospital for a week," he finished. Parks was nodding vaguely. Clayton looked up at the clock above the bar and realized that they'd been talking for better than an hour. Parks was buying another round. Parks was a hell of a nice fellow. There was, Clayton found, only one trouble with Parks. He got to talking so loud that the bartender refused to serve either one of them anymore. The bartender said Clayton was getting loud too, but it was just because he had to talk loud to make Parks hear him. Clayton helped Parks put his mask and parka on, and they walked out into the cold night. Parks began to sing "Green Hills." About halfway through he stopped and turned to Clayton. "I'm from Indiana." Clayton had already spotted him as an American by his accent. "Indiana? That's nice. Real nice." "Yeah, you talk about green hills. We got green hills in Indiana. What time is it?" Clayton told him. "Jeez, whole spaceship takes off in an hour. Ought to have one more drink first." Clayton realized he didn't like Parks, but maybe he'd buy a bottle. Sharky Johnson worked in fuel section, and he made a nice little sideline of stealing alcohol, cutting it, selling it. He thought it was really funny to call it Martian gin. Clayton said, "Let's go over to Sharky's. Sharky will sell us a bottle." "Okay," said Parks. "We'll get a bottle. That's what we need, a bottle." It was quite a walk to Shark's place, and it was so cold that even Parks was beginning to sober up a little. He was laughing like hell when Clayton started to sing. "We're going over to the Sharks to buy a jug of gin for Parks. Hi-ho, hi-ho, hi-ho." One thing about a few drinks, you didn't get so cold. You didn't feel it too much, anyway. The Shark still had his light on when they arrived. Clayton whispered to Parks, "I'll go in. He knows me. He wouldn't sell it if you were around. You got 8 credits. "Sure, I got 8 credits. Just a minute, and I'll give you 8 credits. He fished around for a minute inside his parka and pulled out his note case. His gloved fingers were a little clumsy, but he managed to get out a 5 and 3 ones and hand them to Clayton. "You wait here," Clayton said. He went in through the outer door and knocked on the inner one. He should have asked for 10 credits. Sharky only charged 5, and that would leave him 3 for himself. But he could have got 10, maybe more. When he came out with the bottle, Parks was sitting on a rock shivering. "Jeez," he said, "it's cold out here. Let's get someplace where it's warm." "Sure, I got the bottle. Want a drink?" Parks took the bottle, opened it, and took a good belt out of it. "Whew," he breathed. "Pretty smooth." As Clayton drank, Parks said, "Hey, I better get back to the field." "I know, we can go to the men's room and finish the bottle before the ship takes off. Isn't that a good idea? It's warm in there." They started back down the street toward the space field. "Yeah, I'm from Indiana. Southern part, down near Bloomington," Parks said. "Give me the jug." "Not Bloomington, Illinois. Bloomington, Indiana. We really got green hills down there." He drank and handed the bottle back to Clayton. "Personally, I don't see why anybody stays on Mars. Here you're practically on the equator in the middle of the summer and it's colder than hell. Now if you was smart, you'd go home where it's warm. Mars wasn't built for people to live on anyhow. I don't see how you stand it." That was when Clayton decided he really hated Parks. And when Parks said, "Why be dumb, friend? Why don't you go home?" Clayton kicked him in the stomach hard. And that, Clayton said as Parks doubled over. He said it again as he kicked him in the head, and in the ribs. Parks was gasping as he writhed on the ground, but he soon lay still. Then Clayton saw why. Parks' nose tube had come off when Clayton's foot struck his head. Parks was breathing heavily, but he wasn't getting any oxygen. That was when the big idea hit wrong Clayton. With a nosepiece on like that, you couldn't tell who a man was. He took another drink from the jug, and then he began to take Parks' clothes off. The uniform fit Clayton fine, and so did the nose mask. He dumped his own clothing on top of Parks' nearly nude body, adjusted the little oxygen tank so that the gas would flow properly through the mask, took the first deep breath of good air he'd had in 15 years, and walked towards the space field. He went into the men's room at the port building, took a drink, and felt in the pocket of the uniform for Parks' identification. He found it and opened the booklet. It read, "Parkinson, Herbert J. Steward, 2nd class, STS." Above it was a photo and a set of fingerprints. Clayton grinned. They'd never know it wasn't Parks getting on the ship. Parks was a steward too, a cook's helper. That was good. If he'd been a jetman or something like that, the crew might wonder why he wasn't on duty at takeoff. But a steward was different. Clayton sat for several minutes looking through the booklet and drinking from the bottle. He emptied it just before the warning sirens keened through the thin air. Clayton got up and went outside toward the ship. "Wake up! Hey, you! Wake up!" Somebody was slapping his cheeks. Clayton opened his eyes and looked at the blurred face over his own. From a distance another voice said, "Who is it?" The blurred face said, "I don't know. He was asleep behind these cases. I think he's drunk." Clayton wasn't drunk. He was sick. His head felt like hell. Where the devil was he? "Get up, bud. Come on, get up." Clayton pulled himself up